So I think Arsenal gets a little lucky. Who did not get lucky? Well, that's Erik ten Hag. So, Paul, as the screen says, God, that guy, man. If I ever see a picture of him smiling, it will be the first picture ever. But is Erik ten Hag's time up at United?
I think it has to be, man. It's got to feel like the last grains of the hourglass slipping through, just because, like, I think at some point, if you're Manchester United, you have to make a final call on this thing, right? I think we all agreed that essentially winning that, cup title last year probably skated him through, and the 2 wins against Liverpool basically gave him a little extra lead. But I think at this point, if you're looking in the season and you've got 2 teams in Liverpool and Tottenham who are your rivals that have come in and scored more goals in your own stadium than you have all season, like, I think at some point you got to pull the ripcord on that. And it's got to be pretty soon, I would imagine.
Heard a couple different programs today. They feel like he's probably just got these next 2 matches in charge, which is Porto this week, midweek, and then Villa on the weekend, purely because they couldn't get anyone else in time. And regardless of these outcomes, they probably make the move next Monday and let him go first day of the international break, giving them the week and a half, 2 weeks to figure out what they're going to do. If that's the case, is this more on Ten Hag for failing, or is this more on the Enos people for just not reading the room, not recognizing he wasn't the guy, and basically not having a legitimate replacement for him after last year's FA Cup and kind of succumbing to the pressure of keeping him because of a win in a ridiculous cup game against a team who didn't really look like they were trying?
I think sometimes, depending on who the club is and what your ambitions are, I think sometimes you have to take a gamble on a manager who is an up-and-coming manager. And I think that's what they did with Ten Hag. And, at the time, I thought it was a really good hire. I think everybody thought if you're going to get in the guy from Ajax, at a time when Ajax was absolutely tilting like giants in the Champions League, like, it makes a lot of sense. And so I thought the hire was good. I thought it was an ambitious hire. I think the one question that we had about Ten Hag coming into the Premier League is how he's going to handle the personalities on that side. And when he was immediately handcuffed with the Ronaldo situation, I thought his handling of the Cristiano Ronaldo saga was was really sort of the tell that this was probably not going to work. And I think everything after that just kind of confirmed it. I think, it seems like it kind of reminds me a little bit of like when Liverpool was doing, like, they had the transfer committee, but they were really getting away with it and like getting away from it. And you had these weird buys where like the committee was buying some of these young up and coming players. And then Rodgers was getting Christian Benteke, right? Like, you had these really like disjointed transfers. And that's what it feels like to me. It feels like a lot of these transfers that came in were really disjointed. And the thing for Ten Hag is the ones that were his and clearly his have like categorically failed across the board.
And so, maybe Martinez the only one that you'd argue is even serviceable at this point.
Right.
Onana, massive failure. And that's what he wanted. He wanted the ball playing keeper, and he can't stop a shot when he needs to. You could argue that the Malaysia kid, might have a lot of talent, but can't stay fit enough. I also think he's been saddled with poor buys as well, whether it's Eriksen. I wanted Mason Mount, but he just looks like he's absolutely shot. Maybe the injuries. I was a big fan of Mason Mount too. But then again, I was a big fan of Timo Werner and still feel like if he had come to Liverpool at the time we were arguably trying to sign him, it might have ended up being – he might have worked out because he actually –
I just think it's so hard.
You never know.
Yeah, I think it's hard to judge these kids on like how do you know if he's shit or if he's just at a club that doesn't know how to use him and has just completely lost his confidence? And I think, I'm not convinced Mason Mount doesn't go somewhere else and light the world on fire.
I'm not convinced that he doesn't get another manager that figures out a real system that balances the play and puts a balanced midfield, and that he doesn't find his way back into being a true number 8 instead of being asked to play number 10 in a role that doesn't really fit him with strikers who don't know how to play. So they finished 8th in the league last year. They're currently, I think, 10th or 13th in the league. Are currently 12th. They're 4 points above the drop and 8 points off the top. And anytime United has to hear, I'm double the points away from Liverpool and only 4 points away from the relegation zone, especially knowing that they were ultimately, in my opinion, lucky to get a win in the first match of the season against Fulham. They have losses to Brighton and Liverpool at home, back-to-back weeks. Then they go and beat Southampton and Barnsley, and everyone's like, we're back, we're back. Then they 0-0 draw with a poor Palace team and go on the road and can't secure a win against FC 20 in the Europa League just to come home and get capitulated 3-0 by Spurs without the best player at the club in uniform for the weekend. Like, I don't want to say, like, where does rock bottom come from here, but I already kind of asked you about the Enos people. So let's do this. We only got a couple minutes left. Let's say they do decide it's time to move on. Who do they replace Ten Hag with at this point? And if you were them, would you be looking for a caretaker manager to kind of right the ship? Would you go with the Ruud van Nistelrooy who's at the club currently, or would you swing and swing again and go for another young up-and-coming manager? Because I don't know that Manchester United has the luxury with this roster and these collection of players to get a non-established manager in.
Well, I think they're going to go with Van Nistelrooy, just based on, like, historical precedent at this club. Like, I think that's what they're going to do. And I don't know. I think it's going to be another, like, Ole thing where, like, I think that he does enough and does well enough where he buys himself some extra time and they lead maybe in possibly in the next season, and then it ultimately just doesn't work out. I think Manchester United at some point is going to have to go out and get a top established manager. I just think, like, it's weird to me because when you look at football, I feel like there's less of, like, I feel like 5 years ago we had probably 8 managers that, like, routinely rotated in through major sides and were really well established, vetted managers. And I feel like they've either retired, gone off on the international football, or scattered into the wind in old age. And I feel like we're in this weird transition where we don't have a lot of them left.
No, there's not. I don't think there are. And I always say that to people, who do you want to replace him with? And there aren't names.
Yeah.
I always said, like, I always thought when he was unemployed, I thought Luis Enrique was the best manager not working until he got the PSG job. After he left Barcelona, had his short stint with Spain, and then when he had the cancer, he stepped down. I thought he was the best big name manager out there. I think at this point, it's probably Tuchel. But I don't see Tuchel coming in and doing the job they want at United, and he'll go in there and play pragmatic football, which will just end up getting booed like Mourinho did as soon as you start losing. So to me, I feel like the other part is they want to be progressive. They want to play, which is probably why they'll go with, like, Van Nistelrooy. I actually think quietly, no one wants to hear this. I think quietly, I think quietly Ole is actually in the frame to come back.
Oh, really?
I do, because I think the people who are still left at the club were the people who had his back. And I think Sir Jim Ratcliffe would like to bring back someone who got the best out of Marcus Rashford and got things out of some of the players left, because I think the next manager comes in will be saddled with the mentality that it is your job to make these players work, not get another 150 million spent. And because of that, I think that person will be failed just like Ole was. So